Hello, I'm John McBride. Thank you for joining me again for part 3 of our examination of the Rakuchu Rakugaizu folding screen, sites in and around Kyoto. In part 3, we first visit the mountains that surround Kyoto. This one is Mount Atago and sits in the northwest, protecting the city, as Mount Hiei sits in the northeast. The verdant green of the mountain beckons us, and a little pilgrimage trail is indeed inviting. The mountain is spectacular and is still reached by the same pilgrim trail. With views over the city, our reward. Kuruma-dera is a temple that sits on the other side of the city. Pilgrims throng the main approach steps, and from the main gate, again, views are afforded across the northern mountains of Kyoto. Now, this mountain is known for a resident Tengu spirit. Tengu represent the practice of mountain asceticism in Japan, known as shugendo. Notice the little tokin forehead cap. Tengu spirits are usually seen in the garb of the shugendo practitioners, most importantly with the tokin skullcap. The skullcap is the most important part of the garb. It reminds the ascetic of the 6 major Buddhas and the 12 steps to enlightenment. It protects the ascetic from illness when he is in the mountains. Prior to 1868, about 10% of the male population of Japan identified as practicing shugendo. The Eizan Railway takes you from Demachiyanagi Station to the base of Mount Kuruma. And a side branch of the railway takes you to the base of the most sacred mountain in Kyoto, Mount Hiei, which guards the northeast quadrant of the city. In Feng Shui, the northeast is the demon's gate of the city. From the base of each mountain, cable cars take you to the summits. Or you can take those pilgrimage routes which still exist today. The journey to Mount Kuruma is famous in the autumn when the train slows to travel through the maple tree tunnel. And at night, the cars extinguish interior lights to enable the locals to enjoy the maple light up. All right. Next, we visit Seiryoji Temple, which was founded in 987. It's located in the far west of Kyoto, in the area known as Saga Arashiyama. Its popular name is Saga Shakado, and as the name would suggest, the deity is Shaka-sama, or the historic Buddha, Shakyamuni. The founder was the great priest and great traveler Chonen, who visited China in 983. He went on his own pilgrimage from Mount Tiantai here to Mount Wutai. Tiantai, or Tendai in Japanese, is the source of Tendai Buddhism in Japan. Chonen was in search of the earliest statue of Buddha, and he was told it had been moved to the Song dynasty capital of Kaifeng in Henan province. This is the Song capital of Kaifeng at the time of Chonen's visit. Certainly a bustling capital, again built on the typical grid pattern, and it was a walled city. Back at Seiryoji Temple in Saga, the pilgrims of Kyoto are being particularly reverent. They carry sprigs of the sacred tree, sakaki, here. And you can see them here and here. Now, sakaki is not often seen in temples today, but is always present in Shinto shrines. They are used to delineate sacred spaces. The temple compound includes a taho-to, or many-jeweled pagoda, found primarily at esoteric Shingon and Tendai school Buddhist temples. It is unique among pagodas because it has an uneven number of stories, just two. I beg your pardon, it has an even number of stories, just two. Usually they're 3 or 5. The second story is never used. No examples exist in China. The oldest in Japan is at Ishiyama-dera in Otsu. This is the oldest, dating to 1194, and is a national treasure. However, many examples of the stupa of Taho Nyorai, the Buddha, exist in art throughout China and Asia. Taho Nyorai confirms Buddha's teachings and promises to do so every time the Lotus Sutra is taught. Today's temple contains the statue ordered by Chonin in 985 after he had seen the original statue made for King Udayana, who was a contemporary of Buddha. He ordered the statue when Buddha was just 37 years of age. And this is said to be the first statue of Buddha ordered by King Udayana. This is the statue that Chonen ordered in 985. It's made from cherry wood. In 1953, during an examination of the statue, a compartment was discovered in its back, and these amazing internal organs made from silk were discovered inside. Many copies of this Buddha were made in Japan during the Kamakura period. They're known as Seiryoji temple-style Buddhas, and over 100 still exist today. These two examples stand in Nara. Back in our screen, nearby the temple, there is a sweet seller. Enjoying a roaring trade with children more interested in a treat than praying in front of a 500-year-old Buddha. Well, now 1,000-year-old Buddha. Next, we visit Kinkakuji Temple, the Temple of the Golden Pavilion. It sits nestled away, again in verdant gardens, with its golden rising phoenix visible on its rooftop. Kinkakuji was the retirement villa of the most successful of the Muromachi shoguns, Ashikaga Yoshimitsu. The pavilion miraculously survived the Onin War in the mid-15th century and survived until 1950, when it was burned to the ground in an act of arson by a novice monk. And Mishima Yukio's wonderful novel, The Temple of the Golden Pavilion, is based on this true story. Today's structure is a recreation of the original and remains one of Kyoto's most recognizable landmarks. Next is Honnoji Temple, founded in 1415 by a priest Nichiryu, 1385 to 1464. The temple is famous for the Honnoji incident, when the first great unifier, Oda Nobunaga, was assassinated while he rested at the temple. The temple was initially located between Aburakoji, Takatsuji, and Bukkoji Dori streets. To the left there. Hideyoshi moved it to its current location to the right in 1591, after it was burned to the ground during the attack on Oda Nobunaga. Priests from Honnoji Temple traveled widely, propagating their Hokke sect Buddhism even as far as Tanegashima Island in the south of Kyushu, where munitions and gunpowder technology were received from the Portuguese. And for this reason, the temple always had a close relationship with senior warriors. Oda Nobunaga usually stayed at Myokakuji Temple when he was in Kyoto, but on the 21st of June 1582, his son Nobutada was in residence there, and so he decided to stay at Honnoji, where he had stayed on only 2 previous occasions. His general Akechi Mitsuhide's troops surrounded the temple and burned the temple to the ground. Nobunaga committed suicide while the temple burned around him. Oda Nobunaga's head was delivered to his son by his trusted retainer, a warrior from Africa named Yasuke. The fascinating story of Yasuke arriving in Japan as an indentured slave of Portuguese missionaries is told by Thomas Lockley in his wonderful book. Next is Nishihonganji Temple. The Honganji Temple complex was moved to this location from Osaka in 1591, just 20 or 30 years before our painting. Jodo Shinshu, or True Pure Land Sect Buddhism, was founded by priest Shinran, 1183 to 1263, in the mid-Kamakura era. Shinran was a pupil of Honen, who popularized Tendai Buddhism further by believing that you could enter Amida Buddha's Pure Land by just reciting the Amida Buddha's name. This is called Nembutsu. It simply repeats Namu Amida Butsu. Namu Amida Butsu. Namu Amida Butsu, meaning I take refuge in the Amida Buddha. His teachings, because of their simplicity, attracted itinerant citizens who would normally be excluded from the Buddhist fraternity. His teachings were heavily criticized for excluding most other Buddhist thought. And what was perhaps worse, he placed the lowliest of lay parishioner on the same level as the highest priest. About the same time as our painting, the temple split into 2 factions, one faction represented by those who wanted reconciliation with Oda Nobunaga, who had burnt their temple down in Osaka, versus those who had defended from inside the Ishiyama temple. The latter took the land already gifted, our Nishihonganji temple, and the former sided up to Tokugawa Ieyasu, and they were awarded more land at today's Higashi Honganji temple on the right there. Next, we visit Hokoji Temple, the temple of Kyoto's great Buddha, and also a symbol of the second great unifier, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Unfortunately, we cannot see the great Buddha inside. Tantalizingly, we just see the lotus petals of its base in brilliant gold, and pilgrims marveling at its size and radiance. Because it was destroyed and rebuilt so many times, there are no Japanese images of the Buddha. Hideyoshi prohibited weapons being held by non-military classes, and the confiscated weapons were melted down to create the first version in 1595. Under Hideyoshi's instructions, it stood 16 meters high, exactly 1 meter higher than Nara's great Buddha. It was destroyed in an earthquake the following year and was replaced immediately by a wooden one. The version we see in the screen dates to 1612 and was built by Hideyoshi's son in bronze. Ingilbert Kampfer, a German physician working for the Dutch at Nagasaki in 1691, sketched yet another replacement version that we see on the left there. And I did find one woodblock print with the Buddha peeping out. I've circled it in red there. But these are the only two extant images. Today, the temple stands behind the wonderful National Museum of Kyoto. It still has its bell, which was cast in 1614, which so offended Shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu, as an inscription seen here in the small blue square reads, "The country and the house, peace and tranquility," but are written such that the characters for Ieyasu's name are dismembered by the character for peace. Ieyasu took this to mean peace could not be achieved without his dismemberment. It was enough for him to attack Osaka Castle and kill Hideyoshi's son, and this ended Hideyoshi's lineage. Today, archaeological work continues around the National Museum of Kyoto, where the footings of the great Buddha can still be found. The National Museum of Kyoto is a must visit. The display of Buddhist imagery in the new wing designed by Taniguchi Yoshio is amazing. One feels like you could almost reach out and touch these exquisite sculptures. The Kitano Shrine is in the northwest of Kyoto, another very important shrine to the city of Kyoto and one of its oldest. An interesting looking group of Korean emissaries approach the shrine and pay their respects. They're in the Korean hats there. The shrine was founded in 947, and this structure dates to 1607 and is the one that we can see in the screen. It was the site of a grand tea ceremony in 1587, where Toyotomi Hideyoshi celebrated his unification of Japan. And today you can still get a cup of tea on the 1st of November. This is a depiction of Hideyoshi's great tea ceremony with the shrine and Hideyoshi himself being served a cup of tea. Tea is served outside and in temporary tea houses. The Shokoken tea room was built in 1628 by Hosokawa Sansai and was named after his tea room, the temporary tea room he built, called Facing the Pines at the Kitano Grand Tea Ceremony. And this is the entrance to the tea room within Kotoin, a sub-temple of Daitokuji Temple. This is the location of the Kitano Shrine. Next door is the Kamishichiken Geisha Performance Space. Kamishichiken is a small courtesan district adjacent the Kitano Shrine. Really lovely district to stroll around with many tea houses still operating. And the young Maiko and older geisha present to the public each spring. In 1868, with the separation of Buddhism and Shinto, the shrine lost many of its Buddhist structures and monuments. The old Sutra Hall stands reconstructed at Daiho Onji Temple, which is about 350 meters to the east of Kitano Shrine. Daiho Onji Temple still protects many of Kitano's original Buddhist objects. The main worship hall of Daihonji was built in 1227 and again miraculously escaped the Onin, Meitoku, and Bunmei wars, all of which destroyed most of the city. It is the oldest structure standing in Kyoto today, and I would argue it's a must visit. There are very few tourists here, but there are the magnificent Buddhist objects originally located within the Kitano Shrine. Outside the shrine gates in our screen, we see monkeys performing. And they're performing alongside Hachcho Bozu street performers. And you can see they're using metal drums. Hachcho Gane performers used metal drums as used originally by priest Kuya as he performed Nembutsu. By the late Muromachi and into the Edo period, the performances had become circus-like and were conducted by street performers. On the left is a sculpture of priest Kuya with the words Namu Amida Dabutsu, praise Amida Buddha, coming out of his mouth. Next, we visit Toyotomi Hideyoshi's mausoleum in the eastern mountains of Kyoto. Looking much as it does today. Now, to balance Hideyoshi's influence on the streetscape of Kyoto in the late 16th century, we next visit the Nijo Castle, symbol of the Tokugawa shogunate, the shogunate took over from Hideyoshi in the early 17th century. Construction on the castle and palatial accommodation for the shogun to be prepared for when he was visiting Kyoto commenced in 1601 and was completed by 1626. The keep we can see in our screen was delayed and completed just a few years before our screen was painted. The major refurbishment of 1626, when today's gardens were added, is yet to occur. We lost the keep in 1750, but the palace survives today and is a wonderful visit with its original palatial residence and administration spaces. However, the keep was never replaced. Outside the castle, we see formally dressed warriors calling at the castle on official business. The retainers wait outside with their lances and vanguard poles, the design of which identifies which feudal lord they represent. Inside the palace building, we see the beautiful Kano school golden screen paintings, which the castle is famous for. Beautifully painted cranes dance on raw timber sliding doors, still visible today. When we visit these same rooms and enjoy the painted screens, we have to stand to look at the artwork, but they were actually painted to be enjoyed from a seated position. Looking up and around at them provides perspective. So when you visit, try and crouch down as low as possible to achieve this perspective. Outside, we have an unusual visit from foreign guests, probably Spanish or Portuguese traders and Jesuit priests. They are dressed well, the leader being carried in a palanquin, accompanied by an indentured servant from Africa. They carry exotic animals as gifts to the shogunate, including 2 civet cats, peacocks, and other exotic birds. Next, we visit Rokkakudo Temple. Rokkakudo still sits in the middle of Kyoto, surrounded by busy shopping lanes. We see a group of pilgrims approaching, most likely on a Kannon Bodhisattva pilgrimage of Kyoto. And right in front of the temple is a melon cellar. and visitors to the temple are enjoying cooling slices of melon on the verandas. Rokkakudo means hexagonal hall, which the temple remains today. In the nearby shopping street, we see a fan seller selling already painted paper, or you could order your own design, and the paper would be pasted to the bamboo skeleton of the fan immediately. Today, a 5-minute walk around the corner brings you to Aiba, an operating fan shop. And as they did at the time of our screen, the fan shop keeps up with the latest fashion and designs. Also in the street is a sasara performer. Sasara performed religious sermons for which they would be paid a small amount for good measure. The sasara held a rosary and a whisk in his right hand, and the whisk would be rubbed up and down a notched stick, making a ratcheting musical sound. Nearby is the 4th Avenue Bridge, and at its base sits a tobacco seller, and a customer is trying a small amount of the tobacco in a kiseru pipe. On the Shijo 4th Avenue Bridge itself, we see another formally attired warrior on horseback, headed for an audience at Nijo Castle. A merchant discusses sales from an illustrated catalogue. A nearby money changer keeps the finances of the city moving, carefully weighing copper, silver, and gold coins. And yet another shop, a toy shop, beckons to the spoiled children of the city. A lacquerware store shows off its wares, and a similar store offers other containers, including water bottles made from gourds. Kabuki theatre was already popular in the city, having been founded in 1603, less than 2 decades before our folding screen was painted. Here we see women performing. This would later be banned because of associations with prostitution. The women perform a type of nembutsu, or religious recitation. The queue seems fairly orderly for the ticket office to see the kabuki performances. The Minamiza Theatre, there's the queue. The Minamiza Theatre is the oldest theatre in Japan and is located along the Kamo River at the birthplace of kabuki theatre. Across town is a barber shop just outside Nijo Castle there, tending to the top knot of a warrior. The top of the head would be shaved and the ponytail tied up with strips of white paper, which you can see hanging in the background there, into a top knot, or chonmage. There were many fashions and styles for how these top knots were tied. We'll finish our visit with our final structure, the Kiyomizu Temple, up in the eastern mountains of Kyoto. Its complex scaffolding still survives today, although the full body ablutions in freezing cold water today involve a quick wash of the hands. To conclude, Rakuchu Rakugaizu paintings emerged during the Warring States period and are a large-scale panoramic painting of the capital, Kyoto, unmatched in the history of Japanese painting. They were enormous and very intricate. They conceal interesting political biases among competing warrior families, but for us, they are a wonderful representation of urban life, and I believe add color and meaning to a visit to contemporary Kyoto. Thank you so much for listening in.